Story 1. It's locally relevant, but someone in my region's subreddit asked about where he could find a peaceful, scenic-looking area, preferably with a pretty lake or pond. Unfortunately, he ended up going to the top-rated location to commit suicide. The connection between the act and the Reddit post was made after the fact. Since then, whenever someone asks a similar question in my local subreddit, they may get caught off guard by the question that asks if they're okay. Story 2. When you search for something you are stuck on in a video game, and the search engine says there is a solution on a forum that was posted 5 years ago, you click on the link and it takes you to the thread. Only it looks like this. Deleted. Response deleted. 11,700 upvotes. Username. Oh, thank God. I was stuck on that part for ages. Story 3. When the grandmother put the coconut oil in the girl's hair because she thought her allergy was fake, I was horrified. I would have been in jail and she would have been 8 feet under 6 feet from the professionals who bury and an extra 2 from me stomping on her some more. Story 4. There was a post about a guy wanting to take some datura, and people were telling him not to because it can turn ugly and nasty, mainly because the line between enough and too much is way too thin. This guy took some datura and posted about seeing the dog and the wall moving. It was his last post. If this post was serious, I hope this dude is okay. Story 5. There was a subreddit created by a woman who was in love with Brian Koberger, the guy who allegedly killed those 4 college students in Idaho. She did these bizarre photoshops of him, literally in an Easter Bunny costume for one, and wrote little stories about her wedding to him. Many candidates for the most horrific post, but one strong candidate was one of her disturbing photoshops, which included a picture of the type of knife that was used in the killings, with the caption "Murder Me," surrounded by hearts and flowers. Thank God Reddit finally shut that subreddit down. Story 6. The guy who posted about his wife cheating on him was advised by users on Reddit to file for divorce, and he did. Shortly after, she murdered their children in revenge. Story 7. The post series where the poster's wife ended up in prison. If I recall correctly, the wife was cheating on him with a contractor who was redoing a room in their house or putting an addition on. He ended up filing for divorce and custody of their children, only for her to take their lives. It's quite an awful story that just gets worse and worse as you read it. Story 8. Story from a mother who had a violent and destructive child. She and her husband would barricade themselves and their newborn from him until the violent son made an attempt on the baby. In response, the mother severely beat her son nearly to death and left him to either die or leave, which he eventually did. Story 9. I read this post once about a pregnant woman waking up to find her drunk husband passed out on the couch with a realistic-looking baby doll that was obviously violated. The details made me sick to my stomach. Story 10. Once in an AskReddit comment, a guy explains how someone broke into his house and assaulted his wife. He was wearing noise-canceling headphones and didn't hear her screams. Then he goes downstairs and sees her being assaulted, and shot the intruder in the head. For some reason, the detail of how he wrote it made me really horrified. It upset me for the night. Maybe it was fake. I hope so. Story 11. A man with male postpartum depression is discussing how he dislikes his newborn son and has written a detailed fantasy about placing him in the oven to burn to death and then committing suicide. It was on a parenting forum. Story 12. It was multiple posts, but basically, a guy in a long-distance relationship broke up with his girlfriend, and a few months later, he received a very incoherent email and then got informed by the mother that she had committed suicide and he was the last person she spoke to. He posted in a grief support group, and while some were offering strength, others were skeptical and gently encouraged him to investigate further. Turns out the whole thing had been made up. She had never even attempted it and just wanted to see if it awoke any feelings to start again. Naturally, he was furious and, in a weird way, actually reinforced how he had made the correct decision to leave her. Story 13. This was a long time ago, but there was a discussion about what I guess was love-based pedophilia. A man was talking about how his victim was the 5 or 7-year-old daughter of his best friend and described how he drugged and sexually abused her. He said he would probably do it again, but for now, he was happy with the video he took. His details were just too specific for it not to be true. One of the worst parts is that, of course, people were mostly calling him a pig and trying to figure out who he was or alert authorities, but several people were on the thread asking to be sent the video. It has affected me for over 15 years. Story 14. At the beginning of the Ukraine war, I was just casually scrolling when a completely uncensored photo of a very young child without his head appeared. I screamed and dropped my phone, and my husband had to close it. I will never get that image out of my head. Curse Putin. Story 15. A man attempted to commit suicide but did not succeed in his attempt, resulting in severe injuries to his face. The video showed him sitting in the front seat of his car, making the most distressing moaning and groaning sounds I've ever heard. It is still the worst video I've ever seen, and I think about it constantly. Additionally, there was a video of a drug cartel murdering a young boy who couldn't have been older than 10. They cut his body into pieces with a machete while he was still alive, crying and begging them to stop. That traumatized me significantly. When I was younger, Reddit had a lot more disturbing content that could be posted. I believe I partially have post-traumatic stress disorder from the things I've witnessed on this site. Story 16. In the subreddit about serial killers, there is a diary log of a child predator that delves into the thoughts of a child predator and goes back into their childhood. It is very detailed about how they would choose victims and includes a timeline of all the horrific acts they committed. It is very disturbing, as most abnormal psychology courses at university don't even discuss these monsters. There is also the Toy Box Killer's transcript of the message he would play for his victims, describing what was going to happen to them. Story 17. There was this one I remember seeing where someone wrote about how they slept with their dad, but then described the situation and they basically assaulted their own dad. It was very disturbing. Story 18. Before the subreddit Watch People Die got banned, I stumbled upon a CCTV video. The woman let go of her baby's stroller for a second, and it rolled back and fell backward onto the street, just as a garbage truck rolled up. I saw 2 people die in that video. It still makes me sad thinking about it. Story 19. Man, the story of the guy who randomly tried heroin and the following update post are generally terrifying on how fast addiction destroys your life. Here it is if you are genuinely curious. Story 20. I cannot remember where or why, but this person makes a post saying that he shot his penis off. The people in the comments were saying it was fake and asking for proof, so the person then sends photos of his injured penis. Story 21. In a mom group, a slow story over months with screenshots from another mom group on Facebook about a freebirther who gave birth in a tub outside and just had a very unsafe birth for the baby. The last update was the baby was 9 months old and still couldn't hold their own head up. This family was the kind that swore against modern medicine and thought breast milk could cure everything. I think about that baby still. Story 22. There was a post a guy in his 70s made about a son he had that was horrifyingly evil. His wife ended up beating him up so badly, they left him to die while hiding downstairs, only for the boy to leave the house days later and never come back. Story 23. There are many mentioned I recognize since I've been here since day one. One that bothers me in a different way is the one where the guy kept posting about restoring some very specific wall in a building and how the terrible boss kept taking shortcuts. There was a whole following of this story of the boss getting his comeuppance only to be interrupted by the authors. Mark's wife informing us he was in a car accident but would update soon. Well, Mark didn't recover. It was a soul-crushing read in real time, the unforgiving nature of life on full display. Story 24. My friend shared a post with me about a girl confessing to climbing in a dumpster, sticking rotten meat in her private area, and experiencing pleasure from it, only to then get a severe infection, obviously. Story 25. The worst have been mentioned, so I'll just put out an honorable mention for the woman who found the semen jars her husband kept, and it turned out he had been putting it in her food the whole time they were together. Story 26. The murder of Reefy from Philadelphia. He was an innocent working family man walking down the street. 2 men started shooting him from a parked car. He fell, and they jumped out and executed him in broad daylight on camera. 2 have been arrested. The others are still laying low or on the run. God rest Sharif's soul. Story 27. I came upon a post from a Palestinian guy who was broken from the loss of his father in the recent war. He was swearing to give up his life to avenge his father. I looked at his previous posts and he was just a kind person who was cheering up other distressed people, loved his father, and video games. It was one of the most heartbreaking posts to read, as it felt too real to see another fellow normal person potentially turning into a terrorist. The post was quickly deleted by a moderator. I looked through my old comments to find it, but it seems there is nothing I can do to share it. The user LoveWinter2007 is the person, but it seems like he's banned. Since it seems like I can only view his posts from my mobile app and can't find a way to share the links, I want to provide a bit more information about him for those who are curious. He started posting about 6 months ago, leaving advice and encouragement for mostly people who are having relationship, friend, or family issues. Lots of, "I'm sorry you went through that. I wish you good luck. Things will get better" kind of posts. He comments a lot about his dad on dad-related posts. His dad seems to be very strict and stern. He wants his approval, which he didn't seem to get. He mentions that his dad went to the war and is very worried about his safety, as a lot of his friends also got killed. He loves games and movies and misses his younger years when there were fewer problems to worry about. Just before leaving his last post mentioned above 3 months ago, he made a post selling his presumably poor-quality personal computer and gaming keyboard for $150. It was ironic that previously, he tried to encourage people who are in distress that no matter how difficult things are, you must overcome it and not fall into despair. I really hope he followed his own advice and changed his heart. Story 28. Back in 2011 or 2012, my very first experience with Reddit led me to see a video of a guy sitting on top of an upside-down glass. It shattered. Story 29. When the Russians were first invading Ukraine, a father and son with their 2 German shepherds were there. I can't forget the sound of the son's voice when he said, "Papa." There is a final video someone has posted with just one of the dogs having survived. It won't leave the bodies of its murdered family. Story 30. A person sent videos of himself and a guy in Ukraine until he posted a photo of the guy with no head, as if his head was completely gone. It was uncensored and only marked as not safe for work. War is hell. Story 31. It was around 2014, and it was a video of a man engaging in inappropriate behavior with an open bleeding wound on the arm of, if I remember correctly, a seemingly unconscious woman. The images left a lasting impression in my mind and sometimes still give me uneasy feelings. I was 13 years old in 2014. Story 32. The Poop Sock subreddit, or a post saying, "Maybe Donald Trump has not yet revealed his true plan, and soon he will show us everything he's been doing was for our own good," or something like that. Story 33. A story on a forum where a girl wakes up in the middle of an ice rink surrounded by a crowd wearing pig masks, endlessly throwing garbage at her. An evil Santa Claus sits on a throne in the center, with another girl on a leash who has been tortured for years to the point she cannot speak. Santa puts his cigar out in her eye and tells the girl she will be his next elf. She tries to escape, but the pig masks keep throwing garbage at her. The girl steals Santa's gun and threatens to kill him, but he laughs because he is immortal. The girl realizes death would be better than a life of constant torture like the elf girl, and she shoots herself. The bullet goes through her and hits Santa, killing him. Then it jumps to some paramedics talking about an attempted suicide in a sensory deprivation chamber in a mall. The entire thing was a dream the girl had, and the mall accidentally let her bring a gun into the deprivation chamber. It still kind of messes with me how dark and cruel it was. Now I'm never going into one of those chambers. Story 34. I remember coming across a subreddit based on a fetish where people like to post pictures and videos of dismembering themselves. There was a post where a guy put his hand in a blender. I stopped browsing Reddit for a few weeks after that. Story 35. The series of posts about the guy who became increasingly obsessed with quantum immortality and ultimately followed through with it. His sister even conducted an Ask Me Anything session. User F43 was the one. Check the post history. And the Ask Me Anything session. Story 36. Oh, and the thread about 10 years ago when a bunch of lactating mothers talked about how the nipple stimulation of feeding their child turned them on and how they would either masturbate or have sex with their partner while breastfeeding a baby. Story 37. Commenting on this again. It was an untitled 50-50 challenge, and the bad image or GIF in this case was a guy having intercourse with a dead raccoon that had clearly been deceased for a while, using mayonnaise as lubricant. I'll never unsee his genitalia popping in and out of that animal's rear end. Story 38. I saw a post asking about what someone should do when they find the underground big problem word in a group, and the moderators of the group were banning people concerned instead of answering. It was a weird day for sure. Story 39. Back when there were those graphic subreddits, there was a video from India where a young girl was hit and smeared on the pavement by a truck. Her mother is on her knees, screaming and crying, holding on to her remains.